the 1980 classic Danger by the Motels. And I'm happy to say that with me now is the legendary band's lead singer, Martha Davis. Martha, thank you for talking with me on Revenge of the 80s Radio.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Martha, while most 80s fans know you as the lead singer of the Motels from that decade, you actually started in a band that was to later become your first Motels group, the Warfield Foxes, in 1971.
I was called by my dear friend Lisa Brennis to, I'd fallen madly in love with David Bowie, and though I'd played music since I was 8 is when I learned my first 3 guitar chords, and I started writing songs when I was 15, but I never ever thought about doing it for anybody other than me until David Bowie came along and married all of my favorite kinds of music into that crazy style of his. Because when I was a kid, I loved musicals, I loved classical music, I loved soul music, and he seemed to marry all those things in a very beautiful way, and I got very excited about it. And my girlfriend called me and she said, well, you're talking like you want to do music, so I have a band. Do you want to come over? And I was like, okay. And that band was the Warfield Foxes, and we had 3 rehearsals before we played our first show, which was Halloween night, 1971, in San Francisco. And everyone there was, I think, on acid. Not me, but the audience. There was a naked man painted blue dancing in front of me. And we had our first little show, and it was crazy. But as soon as I was on stage, I realized that that's where I wanted to be. And we went on to practice and write songs, and then we decided we were going to move to L.A. and make it overnight. And that was in about 75. And shortly after that version of the Motels broke up, and the new version, which was put together in 79, got signed in 79 to Capitol Records.
What made you decide to become a singer and writer in the first place, Martha?
Well, like I said, most of it was just me playing music for myself. I would take my guitar. I've had this amazing guitar since I was 8 years old. My dad brought it home from the place he worked in Berkeley, California, because he was worried about it being in the basement of this place. And it's actually over 100 years old, beautiful little parlor guitar. And I would take that guitar after I learned my first 3 chords, which is also an interesting story because I was taught my first 3 chords by a very, very, very wonderful man. He was, at that time, he was a young African-American on scholarship at Cal Berkeley in the law department. And he was my babysitter. My dad hired him to babysit us, and so he could have some little extra cash. And he taught me my first 3 chords. His name is Felton Henderson, and his first job after leaving Cal Berkeley was to work for Bobby Kennedy. He was actually the first African American on the civil rights movement, and he is now a Superior Court Justice at the 9th District, and we're still friends, and he's an amazing man. And if you ever want to see a video about him, you can or try to find The Soul of Justice, and it's all about him. He is quite an incredible man.
Hopefully he'll play some guitar on that, huh?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that, getting together and recording something, because he has a beautiful voice, too. So, but so I mostly just played guitar for myself. I would take the little guitar after I learned my first 3 chords and go in my room and make up different, things with them and try to make up new chords. And every chord I found, I thought I made it up, which is, not true, but it felt that way to me. And then I got married. I got pregnant at 15 and married my husband then, and the only thing he could really do at that point was to join the Air Force. So I became an Air Force wife in Tampa, Florida. From Berkeley, California to Tampa, Florida. Very different, and especially in the 1960s. So my father wouldn't let me bring that little old guitar with me because it was too precious. But finally he sent me down another, just like a cheaper guitar, and that's when I started writing my actual first songs, because I would spend a lot of time alone there. And before, when I would just make up little melodic things on the guitar, now I started putting lyrics to them. So at 15 was when I pretty much started writing songs, but once again, not with any desire to do anything more than just do it. It was just to occupy myself and probably to work out some emotions that I was having at the time. And it wasn't until Lisa called me in 71 and said, "You want to join a band?" that I actually was, fell into it as an actual performing thing, not instead of just something for myself.
Who were your biggest influences, Martha, as a writer and performer?
Like I said, David Bowie pretty much has to be. He did have this way. Like, my favorite music was a very strange mix of. The first piece of music that ever really influenced me when I was just a tiny kid, it was like when I remember being 5 years old and sitting there listening to The Rite of Spring, thinking that it was the best thing I'd ever heard. That piece of music scared me. It was beautiful. It was just such an amazing thing. And I can still remember sitting there and staring at my parents' turntable, thinking the sound was coming out of the turntable, but of course the speaker was at the other end of the room. But so there was that. There was my mother had an extensive record collection that, she was not a musician herself, but she loved music, and she had everything from Jelly Roll Morton to like Bessie Smith and Dixieland and classical, a lot of classical, just a really wonderful old collections from the Library of Congress. I remember one record that particularly got me was a collection of slave songs. And when I was very, very little, I was deeply into Negro spirituals. The first time I ever performed was in the fourth grade. My teacher put me on stage and with my guitar, and I sang like 3 spirituals. I think I did Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, and something else, because they are some of the most beautiful, beautiful songs. I don't think I had any idea what was really going on with them. I do now, but the melodies and just the amount of beauty and hope that can be sung under those conditions, there's something about them that I still, to this day, am terribly moved by. So now I'm rambling.
Now, we're fine with that. Martha, I suppose this very eclectic collection of music, as you put it, has had a big hand in you developing your own talents. You have a very unique voice, and how did you develop that voice?
I was never, ever trained, and I had never thought of myself as a singer. I always think of myself as a songwriter first, and then lucky enough to have some form of voice to sing the songs with, because to me it's more important to tell the story. Bob Dylan, excellent example of perhaps not your most beautiful singing voice, but can tell that story the way he wants it heard. So I never trained, which might be part of the reason I don't, that my voice is unique, because it's never been through any kind of like normalizing. The other thing that I think makes it what it is the songs. Because I'm writing my own songs, I write them to my voice, and so I think it just sort of, makes that even more unique. It's my perspective. I think that the stories that I tell, from my perspective with my voice, sort of couple to make it what it is, and God knows what that is. I have no idea.
Martha Davis is with me on Revenge of the 80s Radio. In 1977, the band The Motels As They Were kind of broke up, but you sort of put together a new Motels band in 1978. Mm-hmm. What musically were some of the biggest differences between the Motels of the mid-70s and the new lineup?
It drastically changed, actually. The old Motels, if you ever were to hear any of the original Motels, we were very funky. We had some kind of crazy Berkeley funk going on. And like a lot of writing was done by Chuck Wada, who was the guitar player, who is a very, very talented and funny writer, and Dean Chamberlain as well, who plays a lot around L.A. these days. But when we finally reformed the band, there was a big influence by Jeff Gerard, because Jeff Gerard he was the one that actually made it happen in a lot of ways, in the sense that I have a terrible time with logistics and organizing,